Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to y'all from St. Francis Retreat Center here at Mepkin Abbey, and welcome to this episode of our Forum for Contemplative Ecology with Life in the Dark, Reflections on the Night Sky Advocacy with Meredith Barges. And so we're happy to welcome you, Meredith, and I'm going to turn it over to Sam to introduce you and to begin our interview.
Thanks so much, Father Garrick, and welcome everyone to this next iteration of the Mebkin Abbey Forum for Contemplative Ecology, where we remember and celebrate the ecological vision of Brother Kyle Berceau, who passed on as a young monk at Mebkin Abbey last year, but whose spirit continues to linger with us as we contemplate together our sacred entanglement with the more than human world we share. And so tonight I'm really excited to be joined by my friend and classmate from Yale Divinity School, Meredith Barges, for this very unique, immersive program called Life in the Dark, Reflections on Night Sky Advocacy. And just on a personal note, Meredith is somebody I admire greatly. We have collaborated over the years, and I deeply admire her deep sense of ministry for our feathered friends, our avian kin. She's somebody who has really walked the walk and taken the path less traveled in following her spiritual journey. And I'm so excited for all the wisdom she will share with us tonight. So Meredith Barges is a bird-friendly building policy advocate, the chair of Lights Out of Central New York, and a PhD student at the SUNY School of Environment and Forestry. She helps people to appreciate the complex lives of birds and how our decisions about buildings and lighting affect bird populations. In 2023, she helped lead a statewide campaign to pass Public Act number 23143, or Connecticut's Lights Out Bill, as co-chair of Lights Out Connecticut. As a former policy researcher at the Yale Bird-Friendly Building Initiative, she co-authored Building Safer Cities for Birds: How Cities Are Leading the Way on Bird-Friendly Building Policy. In 2021, she helped convince Yale Divinity School to join Lights Out for Birds. She holds an MDiv from Yale Divinity School and an MA from the University of Chicago. So please join me in a very warm welcome to Meredith Barges.
Wow, thanks, Sam. Thanks for that wonderful welcome. And it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation to talk about things tonight that are so dear to my heart, which are the night sky. We're going to be talking about migratory birds and spiritual practice and how these things all come together in my own life, but in also the lives of many in the world that are looking at connections with the more than human world, connections with different kinds of spiritual traditions. So I'm just so excited to be here. So thanks so much for the invitation. We're going to start off with a contemplative practice. So I invite you all to get comfortable. We're going to be mostly listening. So we're going to start off with a meditative contemplative practice of thinking about the night sky and thinking about the aliveness and the sounds of the night. So I wonder, and if you'd like to, I invite you, if you'd like to close your eyes. We're going to be doing this practice for a few minutes now. What does the night sound like? And what does darkness sound like? Is it quiet and sleepy and restful and inert? Is it empty and monotonous and drab and dull? Or is the night actually alive and loud? And is it vibrantly expansive? So let's listen to a recording of a night sky or a nighttime environment that was recorded in Ohio. And we'll practice together a contemplative time of being present to the sounds of the nighttime environment. So listen for a while and then we'll do more. This is an invitation to love the night. And I mean to really love the night. Night is a time, but it's also a place, a habitat and a home for so many creatures. Most creatures alive on Earth today are nocturnal. And if you don't already, I wish I could move everyone collected here tonight to love the night and the night sky. To love the night the way that the barn owl does, the way that the sleepy dusk-winged moth does, and the little brown bat. The least shrew loves the night, hunting for insects and small invertebrates on the ground's surface or just beneath the soil and leaf litter, using its long pointed snout. Grayish brown with a white belly that becomes dark in the wintertime and with tiny eyes, the shrew forages for caterpillars and beetle larvae, earthworms, centipedes, and noisy crickets, often sharing the night's goodies with other shrews. The crickets, katydids, are chirping through the night and they send their calls up into the darkness. Fireflies and other beetles use their bioluminescence to attract mates. These creatures love the night because darkness is their home. They live in the night and their survival depends on being able to experience a rich, deep, layered nighttime environment. This makes the nighttime vital habitat. So it's time for us to love the night and to remember important work happens at night in darkness. It's work that we can't always see, but we trust it is vital. And it's time for us to value more the darkness, knowing it's a vital part of every ecosystem on Earth. Have you ever looked up at the night sky to marvel at its beauty and been amazed to hear all the life happening around you? Spring peepers creating their chorus of bright whistles, barn owls hooting and calling to us, calling to each other, crickets rubbing their wings together, the honk of geese and ducks as the night falls, all of the sounds of the night. With all those sounds, there's no denying it, the night is alive. It's so alive. And meanwhile, each fall and spring, high above us at 2,000 to 5,000 feet, up in the air and the night sky, millions of migratory birds are winging their way across the continent. Science from the 1960s shows that many species, including the brilliantly blue indigo bunting, they travel at night under the stars, and they use the stars and constellations to navigate. So again, this is an invitation to love the night, because the night is where vital work is happening, even when we don't see it. The night is alive and full of life. It's what we call in Divinity School a micro homily. So it's sort of a short meditation, like a short sermon, but it's a way to orient us and to invite some questions in.
Hmm. Such a beautiful contemplative opening, Meredith. Thank you so much for bringing us into that wonderment of the night sky and all of the magnificent creatures who are forging their way through the darkness, even those we can't see. So, as we begin here, Meredith, as we do with many of our guests, I'm sure many of us are curious to hear a little bit more about your spiritual path and how you came to find such a sense of kinship with birds in particular, and this creative spark that has animated you to become really a leader in protecting birds in the Northeast.
Yeah, so I always was, a child of nature because I grew up in Vermont, and so there was a forest right behind my house that I would go exploring in. But interestingly, even though I'm a bird advocate now, and that's the subject of my work, I actually didn't start off that interested in birds. They were things they were parts of the environment that I noticed, but it was actually at a really actually very difficult time in my life. I was living in Washington, D.C., across from the zoo. So I was living in Woodley Park, literally right across from the National Zoo. And And all these birds kept coming to like near the roof where I was living, and I kind of felt like they were bringing color and a sense of joy, and I was really became curious about them because I recognized a few of the birds. They were like blue jays, they were cardinals, and I'd always seen the male cardinal, but I had never seen the female. So I wondered what kind of bird is this? So I started to become very interested in birds at this very kind of like a transitional time in my life. Um, and then that opened up where I started to go bird watching, and then got really interested in birds. And if anybody here is a bird watcher, you know our migratory birds here in North America are absolutely beautiful. The colors, they're so tiny, they're so animated, and their lives are so fascinating. That they're spending part of their time in the southern part of in South America and the southern part of North America, and then they come up to nest like up in the boreal forests of Canada and sometimes up in Vermont, and I was just like fascinated by these incredibly dynamic lives and all that they risk and all that they gain through their migrations. And I think it was maybe about 5 or 6 years into my bird watching that I discovered that not only are our migratory birds in serious peril, there was a very important report that came out in 2019 showing that 1 in 4 birds have disappeared from the landscape in the last 50 years. It's Rosenberg et al. It's called Decline of North American Avian Fauna. So I didn't know like how much population pressures were on our birds. And then at the same time, I learned about advocacy that was happening where I was living at the time, New York City, to protect birds in the built environment because they face a lot of hazards. They're not used to flying, obviously, through urban environments. They didn't evolve to fly through our hugely dense cities. So it was really this moment where I realized not only are they in peril, but that they're facing very specific threats, and I felt that they needed my help somehow. I thought they bring me so much joy, they bring me so much wonder. How can I make sure that their lives are protected and full, and that they get to live out their lives completely? Because unfortunately, a lot of migratory birds are killed in urbanized areas. So that's sort of like the background of like, how did I get involved in this particular issue? Is that literally, I happen to be one of those people who writes a postcard. And then when I moved to Connecticut, it happened to be that it wasn't that kind of advocacy wasn't happening there yet. So I kind of, it was one of those moments where you kind of realize if I don't do it, who will do it? So I became an advocate because I love the birds so much. As you know, Sam, from our
Totally.
many bird walks together.
Of course, of course. And, there's that expression, we can't protect that which we don't love, right? And that love we feel for our creaturely relatives is what causes us to want to protect them, to want to speak out. And I'm just reminded, Meredith, of this really pivotal like transition in your vocational journey where I remember you coming to Divinity School and you were interested in hospice chaplaincy
Yeah,
for
that's right.
humans, right? And then
Mhm.
you went through this kind of transformation where you realized you were called to a different kind of ministry. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that sort of vocational discernment for you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So yeah, when I applied to Yale Divinity School it was just as the pandemic was starting, was in late 2019. And and I had felt a calling because I feel pretty comfortable sitting with people as they're going through their transition. I felt that, there was some work that I could do there, especially because I'm interested in things like green burial practices and new kinds of ritual around loss and mourning. So I was really interested in that. But when I got to Yale Divinity School, like literally from the moment I set my foot on our residential campus, because Yale Divinity School is a residential campus, so you can live there at the Divinity School, which I did. I was in the Div apartments, and it was August, so I showed up. As we're in August now, it's about the start of a new school year, and I stepped out to see the Perseid meteor showers, which happen. They're coming up. They're coming up in 2 weeks. They start about August 13th or so. So I stepped outside thinking, oh, maybe I'll get lucky and I'll see one or two meteors, make a wish and it'll be an important moment. So I stepped outside of my div apartment and I could not see anything really except maybe two stars in the sky. Not because it was a full moon night, but because the tremendous amount of light pollution that's in the city of New Haven. New Haven's a very, it's a middle to small size city, but they have tremendous amounts of light, street lighting, and in particular, Yale has a lot of light, building lighting and also pathway lighting. So it was just incredibly light polluted. I actually got into my car and looked on the map to see where could I find a green space, using like a Google map. And I started to drive, not knowing the area, to try to see where could I just see one meteor. And so I drove and I drove. I found a park and I got out of my car and I looked again. And I think I was like somewhere near the sound. Again, I could not see even one meteor. And that whole night went by. I never saw a meteor. That whole Perseid meteor shower was lost to me. So it really awakened me to the problem. And then I think it was the next day I was thinking, well, if I can't even see one meteor shower when literally hundreds of meteors are shooting across the sky at the time, how would I be able to, how would the birds be able to navigate? Because I knew at the time that, light pollution negatively impacts migratory birds. And so I kind of became called to say, well, how could we do things a little differently here at my school? You were there as well. So it was sort of like, what could we do here to make sure that the birds that are navigating through don't get confused, don't get drawn in by the light, which is what happens is that migratory birds get attracted to light pollution. So they get attracted to artificial light at night. And so I was thinking, what could we do differently? So that's kind of like what started it when I was at Yale.
Mm-hmm. Amazing.
Yeah.
And I still remember that spark for you and all that you collaborated with. I think Craig is here in the Zoom,
Oh.
I believe, and uh, other folks with the Lights Out Connecticut with whom you really developed this strong rapport and really began to turn your faith into inspired action. And before we talk, primarily about that advocacy, Meredith, I know that there have been some certain scriptural passages that have really resonated with you. And, as we think about the theology, the philosophy of the night, of darkness, which, is a complex subject, I think, in spiritual circles, because sometimes we have this sense of dichotomy of light and dark. But many of the great mystics talk about the fecundity of the dark, the sacrality of the night. And I'm wondering if there are any scriptural passages that really resonate with you as you think about, a sense of holiness in the night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. There are a few, and let's. The first one is some of you might know Psalm 8, which is it's the astronomer's song. This one, it's a psalm, but it's often called the astronomer's song because it paints a picture of the night sky and really orients us to the night sky. And this is a psalm that's meant a lot to me. You know, it meant me when my grandmother passed, we read this psalm, and I think it speaks to a lot of people. With just it's sort of a praise for God's handiwork. And so I just take a moment to read it together. I'll just read out loud the passage here. Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory in the heavens. Through the praise of children and infants, you have established a stronghold against your enemies to silence the foe and the avenger. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place. What is humankind that you are mindful of them, human beings that you care for them? So thinking about the that first passage, Psalm 8, that really gives you a perspective about our proportion, in relation to that huge night sky. I mean, the night sky is massive. It's literally infinite, we know from science. It's been a source of wonder for, since humans were humans. It's a source of contemplation, and it also has been a real reminder of our place. Like, where are we in the universe? When we look up at that night sky, we realize we're not the only ones here. We're so small in comparison, as we know. And so, like, it really gives you a sense of your proportion of like your place in the universe, and the awesomeness of God, the awesomeness of our Creator. And so that is such a amazing song. But I will say, when I was a young person, it really overwhelmed me. I mean, the night sky did. Um, I can say my grandfather, Russell Jenkins, he was a novice astronomer. He was an engineer at Kodak, so he was like inventing machines and things for, cameras and the camera paper or the photo paper. And in his free time, he would track satellites for NASA. He actually was given like a telescope that he set up in his backyard, and it was massive. I mean, it had to be transported on this huge truck bed. It was delivered, and he set it up there in Rochester. And he actually, the family bought a house in Rochester so that they could be with less, farther away from light pollution. So it was like the edge of a farm, and he would look up at the night sky. Um, Fast forward to 1986. Some of you who are gathered tonight might remember that was the year that Halley's Comet shot by in February of that year. Happened to be my family was in Florida visiting my grandfather for February vacation when Halley's Comet flew by. And so my grandfather woke me up, or we already had a plan that we would watch Halley's Comet go by together. So my grandfather woke me up in the middle of the night. It was just me and him. We looked through his telescope, we saw his comet, and it was just a really amazing and tender moment for me, especially because my grandfather passed away the next year. So, you know, it was a really profound experience. That same trip, or one, it might have been that trip, or I think it must have been that trip. My grandparents took us to the planetarium there in Fort Myers, Florida, and I watched for the first time like a real narrative about the night sky and about asteroids that were predicted to hit the Earth and all the calamity that's always happening in the universe of like, supernovas exploding and time collapsing. And it really overwhelmed my sense of imagination. And I actually had like an existential crisis following this awakening to the awesomeness of the universe, let's say. And also, I would say death, because that's the ultimate death to me. I thought, like, not only will I die, but then this earth will die. My earth that I call home will die when this asteroids hits. And I had a real existential crisis that lasted for some time. But because I was still a young person, but it was just too much for my mind. And that's what this Psalm 8 kind of points me towards, is this idea of proportion, of like, we're so small in comparison, God's handiwork, the stars and the moon. And we have to remember that. What are we? What am I in this world in comparison with all of that? And it can be very humbling, which it should do, and also can be very frightening, which it did for me. And I'll just say there's actually a scientific medical term for that, which is astrophobia, where you're actually scared to look at the night sky, which I was. I was terrified. So it's sort of ironic that now I'm a night sky advocate, because as a young person, I couldn't find the right spiritual practices or whatever to be able to work through the awesomeness and my own smallness in comparison.
Hmm. Yeah, it's such a paradox in some way, right? Our smallness in the scale of the universe and the grandeur of creation. And yet, as we deepen into our consciousness of what Thomas Berry calls a sacred universe, I think we begin to experience a deep sense of connectedness, a deep sense of, Thomas Berry says we are the self-reflective consciousness of the universe, awakening in a human form. And I find that sensibility to be profoundly activating and empowering. It is simultaneously humbling, but also inviting us to be perhaps caretakers or participants in the larger flourishing of creation, right? Well beyond our human form. And so, yeah, I appreciate you kind of reflecting on that that topic as we think about the vastness of the cosmos and the night sky, Meredith. And
Yeah.
I'd love to hear you talk as well. Earlier, we spoke about some of the cultural significance of, light and dark, and some of the cultural baggage that is associated with sometimes that dualism or that distinction between light and dark. And so, how in your work do you think about um, re-sanctifying our
Mm.
understanding of the dark?
Wow. I know. I feel like that's the biggest challenge. I mean, I think with a lot of times with environmental advocacy, or maybe advocacy in general, is to try to get people to see something in a new way.
Mm,
Because the night sky or the nighttime environment has been really undervalued, especially in our society, in our capitalist society, where we're always on the go. People drink so much coffee, we're just trying to get so much work done. It's just we work way into the night. People don't go to sleep till however late. People stay up really late with all the artificial light, and it really has an impact on us where we don't know how to turn off. We stop even knowing what the normal rhythm of the night and the day is, or the day and the night, because the day, which is so productive, it bleeds into the night, and we have no time for that quietness of that inner experience of the contemplation that I think night, that restfulness that night has meant for most of like human existence. We're kind of like we're living and literally lighting up the whole night without respecting that darkness has its role as well. Darkness, that contrast, that they work together, and we're really out of balance when we're just shooting all this light into the sky. We've got like the epicenter of it, sort of like New York City, Times Square. How much light is there? You can literally read a newspaper in the middle of the night with so much light all around you. It's just we're out of balance. And I think that's part of it, is that we don't appreciate the nighttime environment. We don't value darkness in other ways as well. That the quietness, the mystery, the unseen. In our society today, the unseen is often discredited or not believed or not appreciated. And so we don't appreciate that there's a lot of things that are happening that we don't necessarily see, that has tremendous value to us personally. Like biologically, our human bodies require the night. We need to go through those cycles. The earth needs to go through those cycles. Our ecosystems need to go. And it's that lack of valuing of the night that causes us to really harm it in a lot of ways. I mean, all that light pollution causes a tremendous amount of harm to ecosystems, all different creatures that live in the night, including ourselves. So, and I'll just say quickly is that whole binary of like dark and light, good and bad, and smart and not smart. I mean, there's all these association with darkness. Like to be in the dark is a bad thing. To be dark, even have your skin color dark, is a bad thing within the white. This the kinds of binaries that we're trying to come out of. So you can see how, and even the feminine is often associated with the night, and softness and gentleness and mystery. So these are all things that are undervalued right now, I think it's socially and culturally. And to have a shift where we think, like, well, what's out there in the night? What's there for us waiting in the mystery, and that we can appreciate and have a new perspective on. So that I feel like that's actually the
mm,
bulk of my work, honestly,
mm.
is to say, look, let's reevaluate this. Let's get a different perspective, because once we do, we realize we need the night, we need the night sky, we need all those birds, we need our own health, and then all the spiritual resonance that has as well.
Really powerfully said, Meredith. And, I think about this desire to control that sort of powers so much of artificial lighting, like this need to keep lights on through the night to somehow trammel the darkness or overcome the darkness as a sort of a condition of creation. And how do we seed that sense of control and really welcome in the mystery, as you're saying? I almost think about the via negativa, or the apophatic theology, right? Of allowing for the mystery of the divine, right? By what the divine is not, perhaps, the unknowable, the ineffable, right? And we seem culturally, in the West at least, to be somehow uncomfortable with that which cannot be controlled, that which is ineffable. And I find it really profound what you're inviting us into, both theologically, but also ecologically, because you're pointing to all these creatures that you said the vast majority of creatures are nocturnal. I mean, that's I think a profound insight that many of us didn't know. And so, pivoting into how do we live into this consciousness, Meredith? I'd love to hear you chat a little bit about some of the liturgies that you have brought forth and ways that you have brought migratory birds, for instance, into ritual practices to really bring this awareness into our spiritual lives.
Yeah, it was that time when I first got to when I literally was in New Haven. All of a sudden, there were all these opportunities to connect with people. Um, I started to connect with a lot of the people at Divinity School who were also interested in religion and ecology, which I hadn't gone to Yale necessarily to do religion and ecology. I was there, like I said, to do more like hospice work and like chaplaincy, and then maybe do some green burial work. But suddenly, I was finding all these kindred spirits, mostly hanging out at the Div farm,
Yeah.
and around the fire pit at Yale, and having all sorts of interesting discussions. And I was able to find some kindred spirits at Yale, like Tyler and, or no, actually Tyler wasn't there till the next year.
But
Like
Tasha's also
Tasha,
here
there's
too, some of
Tasha.
our old friends. Absolutely.
Tasha's on the call. Yeah, all these wonderful people who are like, yeah, let's do something together where we can celebrate the night, we can celebrate migratory birds, because my obsession, my passion is birds. But people were like, well, let's give it a try. So we did one service in Mark One Chapel where we played out songs of birds, and we gave kind of like a celebration of I think it was spring migration. And another person was a Kate uh,
Kaylee Kassenheiser?
exactly,
Yeah.
yes. Kaylee did a full mass, a migration mass, she called it, and wrote the most gorgeous invocation celebrating all the birds. Like I should have read that at the beginning. It was so beautiful, like just celebrating the birds traveling across the sky, all the different bird species and what they do. And like suddenly I was finding all these people who were finding a resonance that it was birds plus and like birds and ecosystems. And we ended up doing some very interesting things. Like I had like cutouts of the different birds. So when I gave my senior sermon, which was on the two birds in the Noah's Ark story, because we always remember the dove, but actually there was a first bird, which was the raven. So I gave my whole sermon about the two birds and like building the ark. Or now I suggested that we're actually building an anti-ark where like actually creatures can't survive, whereas like before Noah was tasked with building an ark where all the creatures could survive. But and that was sort of like the point of my sermon was like, we're actually building an anti-ark where like only certain creatures are allowed in this ark. Every other creature is killed off, doesn't matter what's happens to them. So I was kind of using that really beautiful, the flood narrative, to talk about it. And also because I just want to make a point here. God, or the creator, did not tell Noah only to save humans. And the creator didn't tell Noah to only save Noah's family. The creator tasked Noah with saving all creatures, because not because that was, at least I don't know, I don't want to into it, but one way that I could read that possibly is not just that, that's God's creation, therefore it should stay intact and it will be able to regenerate itself the way that nature is so regenerative and has the urge of survival and can re-flourish if we give it a chance. I think that story's in there. But also within there is the story that we need those other creatures. How could Noah, if it was just Noah allowed on the ark and then they go and land somewhere, how could they how could they flourish without all the other creatures? Not just the ones that they were going to eat. And I know like Noah did his sacrifice but not just the ones that they were going to eat, but all the creatures that make an ecosystem healthy and vibrant for a human to live in. We need all these creatures. And do they need us? Probably not, but we need all the different creatures in the ecosystem. So I just think about like what that passage tells us. And so I was able somehow when I was at Yale to have this opportunity to explore more and to really look at the religion and how it relates with ecology, and try out different homilies, both at Mark One, but also because we were sometimes given opportunities to do guest preaching. So whenever I got a guest preaching, I always said I only preach about nature. I only preach about birds and nature. So it doesn't necessarily have to be birds. It has to be about nature. So, and no church ever turned me down. So I would get an invitation. I say, I can only preach about nature. And they say, that's fine. Even when I preached about Pentecost, I preached about nature. So anyway, it's a long way of saying Yale ended up being this really fertile place to explore, as I know Sam has been so incredibly fertile for you, for Tasha, for Tyler, for so many of us who were in that vein of Divinity School of Yale. It's been really rich to explore.
Totally. And I've been really moved by your liturgical expressions, Meredith, and the presence of these threatened or extinct birds that you have brought physically, through this signage into ritual practices, and this sense of sacred earth community, that image of Noah saving an ark with all of these creatures. I mean, what a powerful parable for us to think about the entire sanctity of creation. It's really just such a profound and radically inclusive vision.
Yeah, don't leave any out. Don't leave any out. Because actually, I'll just say really in a funny way today, where was I? Oh my gosh. I was going into a store and it had one of those sandwich signs and it said, oh, it was at a library. It was at the library here in Vermont. And it said, I wish that Noah would have swatted those 2 mosquitoes. Was like the sign on there. And I was just thinking, that's so weird. Such a weird concept. Like mosquitoes are really vital to the ecosystem. Unfortunately, they do carry, but they're really vital part. We can't just eradicate the species we like or don't like. And I love that radical inclusiveness that you're talking about. Noah had to save every creature. So, which is not an easy task.
Beautifully said. And it dovetails well, I think, with what we discussed last month with Tyler Nelson, who's here this evening, and this notion of edamophilia, or the love of insects, and the indispensable place that invertebrates have in holding up ecosystems, in securing our food webs, right? The tiniest creature among us actually being indispensable to the interconnected web of life. And I think it's really, important that we're foregrounding that in this discussion of, life in the dark, Meredith. And so, as we think about putting our faith into practice and really bringing ecological spirituality into inspired advocacy, I'd love to hear you reflect on your advocacy in Connecticut. I mean, you helped pass this state level law, which was, I mean, just an extraordinary accomplishment, right? Going from, a graduate student who's discerning a career path to really, making a difference from a statewide perspective, and then also institutionally at Yale Divinity. I'd love to hear you talk about, what you were able to bring forth.
Yeah, so I'll just say, part of the advocacy was I started right there where I was, which is a really important part of the advocacy is like start, it's hard to start globally. I knew I had to start in my backyard, which was literally Yale Divinity School. So I took photographs of what our campus looked like at nighttime, and showed all the lights that were on in our buildings and our administration buildings. And I actually emailed them along with a nice letter to our Dean Greg Sterling. And I just wrote, oh, this is what our school looks like at night. And I think that there's a way that we could safely turn off some of these lights. And amazingly, he was totally receptive to it. He said that he recalled as a young person, hearing the geese circling around his town, and that he had somehow perceived that they were disoriented by the light, and that they had been circling around his town. So he was very receptive. And then that kind of like put wind in my sails, that early immediate win, where I was thinking, wow, is it that easy? Just asking. And he did turn off a lot of the lights, and they did some changes. I mean, not as much as I'd wanted, but he did a lot of changes to the facilities to make sure that more of the lights were off. And that put wind in my sails, where then I started to write to all the different bird conservation groups in the area, and asked, well, what are you doing for the birds and light pollution? And suddenly I got an email back from this person, Craig Riphas, who was the chair of conservation at the Connecticut Ornithological Association. He's the former president of the New Haven Bird Club, which is the oldest bird club in the country, and all these things. And he had like this huge long resume of being in charge of like literally every single bird organization like in Connecticut. And he suddenly emails me back and said, sadly, we're not doing anything. Like, what could we do? Let's meet and have a coffee. So it turns out we're both from Vermont. Turns out we both are huge lovers of Henry Thoreau, and we had a lot of things in common with bird watching. And we decided first we were going to make Lights Out New Haven. Well, then we made a poster. We were all ready to go Lights Out New Haven, when suddenly we were invited into a phone call with several different state lawmakers plus other organizers who said, look, we've got this bill, and it's to turn off lights at night for birds. It's statewide for all state-owned buildings. We weren't able to do it this year, but we think that if there's enough ground level knowledge and awareness and a demand for this law, that we think we'd be able to pass it. So we would like you to do Lights Out Connecticut, not Lights Out New Haven. So we were kind of like amazed. We were like, okay, let's give this thing a try. So we created Lights Out Connecticut, which at first was part of the Connecticut Ornithological Association. And we were doing our presentations. Craig and I were just like, it was just the two of us. We were going and testifying. We testified in Hartford. And next thing you knew, even this bill that went nowhere, it was, let's just say, dead on arrival the year before. Suddenly in 2023, it passed unanimously out of the Environment Committee. We organized a writing campaign so that all these different organizations were expressing support for it. We connected with Dark Sky Connecticut, which Leo Smith is a total hero. We connected with him, and we connected with all these groups so that we were able to get this wind going behind this bill. So it went unanimously out of the House, then unanimously out of the Senate, and we just kept putting all the stuff on social media, getting people's signatures. We had so many co-sponsors of this bill, because it was estimated that if it was implemented correctly, and this is just one reason, besides this saving the birds, is that it was estimated it was going to save the state of Connecticut $1.6 million every year in energy savings. So all the Republicans were voting for it because it was energy savings. It's no waste. They hate waste. Republicans hate waste, and the Democrats were loving it because it's energy efficiency, and they love ecosystem. I mean, I don't want to make too many generalizations here because it cuts across. But we suddenly had bipartisan, unanimous support for this bill that then was signed into law by Governor Lamont in June of 2023. So I graduated, and then this happened, and I was just thought, my God, like, this is incredible. And then more things happened after that, but because we ended up inspiring a Lights Out Greenwich, Connecticut. And then they ended up the following year in 2024, getting the most comprehensive municipal lighting law in all of Connecticut getting passed through the amazing work of Mina Klockenbrink. So it was just like one thing kind of inspiring another. And we ended up being able to make a big change, because Connecticut is now one of only 3 or 4 states that has a statewide law, because in the bill, it literally says, turn off the lights for birds. It literally says for birds. So that's like a massive win. That's already considered a bird-friendly building or bird-friendly development policy. And so we had a win, within a year. So it's just like all these things happen so fast that that it makes you really ambitious. So.
Oh yeah. I mean, that is just so inspiring, Meredith. And I almost want to do like a group applause on Zoom because I mean, we need
Yeah.
we need stories to celebrate, right? In
Yeah.
ecological and environmental work. Like we need to hear these stories and lift up the possibilities of inspired advocacy, right? I see Kim
Yeah.
Stoner here, who's a friend and an entomologist here in Connecticut, who's been an extraordinary leader in the Connecticut Green Amendment movement. And, you know, there's so many great people out there doing important work that often flies under the radar. And I think, yeah, this is just a really exciting story that obviously has implications for other regions too. And in that
hmm
vein, Meredith, we'd love to hear about what you're doing now that you've relocated to New York to pursue your PhD, and the story you in the spirit of celebration with this sports arena at
Oh, yeah.
Syracuse University. We'd love to hear that story.
Okay, sure. So after Yale, I kept thinking, oh, I'll end up working at a conservation organization of some kind. I thought, oh, I'll land in some Audubon or state level Audubon or something, and I'll keep doing bird conservation. But I kept getting a calling, and actually, I want to give a shout out to Viveka Morris, who's my really close friend, but also a mentor to me, even though she's younger than me. But she's a really close colleague who heads the Yale Bird-Friendly Building Initiative. She kept saying, you should do a PhD because Sam mentioned at the beginning of this Zoom call that I co-authored Building Better Cities for Birds. Well, and that's a policy paper. It's like a 70-page policy paper. And she kept saying, you should do a PhD. You obviously have a knack for policy because my background is in good governance. And so as the time went on, I thought, okay, let me go do a PhD. I'll go do my PhD. I'll only focus on bird-friendly building policy, and that's what I do is I study basically like emergent urban environmental policy. So we mostly think about environmental policy as like federal or maybe state level, but like more and more cities are having their own environmental policies and that are appreciating the importance of biodiversity. So that's the subject of my dissertation. And and while I was there, of course, I had to get involved in advocacy. So I teamed up with this, or actually one of my committee members, Patrice Cole, was like, "Oh, I'm the faculty head for this student group called what are they called? I don't know. I can't think of it right now. But this doesn't really matter. But she's like, oh, this student group, and they want to do something. They want to have some kind of an advocacy campaign this semester. And and we think maybe light pollution on our campus could be the thing. So I went and I did a presentation. They were like, this is great. We want to turn it off because my school, which is a SUNY school, is literally attached to Syracuse University, which is a huge school. And it happens to be that their sports arena, which is massive, because, like Syracuse, what is it, the Orange Men? They play a lot of football and basketball there. And they have the huge concerts there, like Metallica was there. Well, they spent $10 million just on the lighting for that arena. Their arena lighting costs $10 million and it blasts all night long. They turn it different colors. They'll turn it like red or whatever. And it's really considered like the most dominant thing on the nighttime city skyline. So if people need to go home, they say like go towards the dome. The dome is home. If you need to get back to campus, go to the dome. The dome is home because it's so bright in the night sky. Well, people kept saying in these meetings, we got to get them to turn that light off. We don't want the light, blah, blah. Like that was kind of the thing that they wanted to achieve. And it just so happened that someone told me, oh, well, what they usually do is on Earth Day, they turn the arena green. So they would turn this gigantic $10 million worth of lighting bright green. And I thought, well, the actually green thing to do would be to turn it off. So we made it a campaign of it's just like go really green, turn the arena off, turn the stadium lights off. And miraculously, like somehow, this is like divine providence. Two of the student leaders in the group ended up in a van going to Washington, D.C. with the vice president of our communications to do like meet and greets in the Senate and do like congressional visits. So these two students, undergraduates, were in the van for 11 hours with the VP, telling him why it was so important, why they had to turn the lights off and everything. And it turned out that actually Syracuse turns the lights green because they're trying to make our campus happy, and that's why they do it. And so when Mark Lichtenstein, he asked the facility person, "Oh, well, could you just turn the lights off for Earth Day?" They were like, "Sure." And so they didn't just turn it off for one night, they turned it off for 2 nights. They turned it off for the night before to test it, and then they turned it off the second night because it was Earth Day. And so as soon as we found that out, we had already been planning a reveal party. We called it the green reveal. Was that, were they going to turn the arena lights off or not? Because we had a op-ed in the newspaper, we had all this stuff. So we're like, are they going to turn the lights off at night? So there's a huge gathering in our quad with a campfire, and we were already planning for s'mores and all this stuff, and then had a speaker ready. I mean, I say a speaker system. And when we found out, we're like, my God, the lights are off. Then they got more lights to be turned off. They got the spotlights shining on our quad to be turned off. So those were our own ESF lights. Then they got lights in some of the buildings to get turned off. So literally our campus quad was dark for the first time in I don't even know how long, decades probably. And it was so dark we could finally see 15 stars in the sky. And it turned into this huge party because we had s'mores. People started telling poems, saying poems into the microphone. People were singing songs into the microphone. People had their like cozy blankets on the lawn, and like people were just telling stories and like huddling around the campfire. And it was like the most wonderful evening. Everyone said it was their favorite night of the year, that it was so intimate and warm being together in the dark like that. And that was all because for one night we could turn off the lights, and everyone was so it transformed our whole campus and our whole social interactions. Because I mean, there's so many layers to it. We could talk all night about the night and its significance. The other thing is the unseen, is that, it gives you permission. You can kind of like be yourself, let something other side of you come out. It's like sort of that unconscious, the subconscious, the mystery. And so people were really having fun with this nighttime environment, and like just being a little bit more relaxed and being themselves in this space. So it was really, really special.
Wow. What a awesome image. It makes me want to make the trip up there for the next Earth Day. It sounds like
I don't know.
an
I hope they
incredible
do it again.
celebration. Yeah. Yeah. Just yeah, what an inspiring story, Meredith. And as we come to like the last part of our discussion portion for tonight, I did want to give a chance for you to also reflect to the audience, like what are some tangible things that each of us can do in our home communities, right? Whether
Hmm.
it's like turning off our own lights during migratory bird seasons, or advocacy that we can do. Like, how can we help carry forward this inspiration?
Yeah, there's so many things. I mean, they say about light pollution, it's the quickest and easiest form of pollution to fix. With water pollution or with air pollution, it takes a lot of, technologies and a lot of effort to reduce it. With light pollution, it's as easy as literally turning the lights off, one switch. And it's so it's an opportunity. I would invite you all to reconsider your lighting needs, and also reconsider the lighting needs of your community, of however widely you want to draw that circle, your neighborhood, your condo association, your business, your the office where you work. It's like how much light is needed and how many lights could be safely turned off. And you might be surprised like how few actually. The science tells us that like actually crime is not like having more light doesn't necessarily mean less crime. It makes us feel safer, but it actually doesn't usually make us that much safer, because most crime happens in the day. A lot of it's happening online now. Some crime does happen at night, but it's not the kind where if you leave your porch light on all night, you'll have less crime. There's no correlation on that. Just makes us feel safer. But as you all know from your previous one, and also as I mentioned, leaving the lights on all night has a lot of consequences for the ecosystem, for us. It has a lot of climate impacts with all the associated carbon emissions of light. So it's really a really evaluate how much light do you need, and can you turn off more lights at home safely, turn off more lights in your community, and then see what could be done.
Hmm. Hmm. Thank you for those really tangible action items, Meredith.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of them. You know, there was another passage that was put on the screen earlier, and it relates to our discussion about
Please.
some of those binaries of light and dark and good and bad. And we didn't talk completely about that, but like in the Christian tradition, in particular, there's a lot of association between light and goodness, and like the book of John, and Jesus was called the light of the world. And so the light has a lot of resonance of something good, and then by contrast, some things that are dark are bad or evil, and that's had a lot of negative cultural consequences, as we talked about. But something that Sam and you and I talked about earlier was about what the mystics say about darkness, and what the resonance of the mystery of creation and of the universe, all of those kind of resonances with darkness that a lot of deeper spiritual mystical traditions lean into, which I don't know if people here on this gathering have thought or considered about, like, darkness as as a spiritual concept or a spiritual practice. People sometimes, I guess, when you go into Advent and you think about the night of the winter and everything. But I was going to say, this other passage, which is from it's from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and it's talking about this concept of kaivalya, which is basically the the ultimate existence that has no attributes. It has no time. It has no gender. It has no shape. It has no form. It has no color. And so it's the beyond. That's almost like in the beginning of Genesis, when like the absolute nothingness that was before God's creation. It's that infinite expanse that's so huge and so but without any shape. And actually in the Yoga Sutras they point to it as well, which is kaivalya. And that's sort of my spiritual orientation to the darkness and to the dark, which is that unseen, which is so profound and so infinite and that's really the ultimate. That is the ultimate existence, which is like beyond all of these changing forms that are always, things that are coming and going, coming into being and shaping and changing. But the eternal truth of the reality is this idea of kaivalya, which is beyond, which is it's the beyond, and something that our minds can't even conceive of, you know. So I wanted to mention that as well, because it's been an idea that's really profoundly affected me in my spiritual work, and also even in my night sky work, which is when I think about the value of darkness, even though even Kaivalya wouldn't even call it dark.
Really profound, Meredith, and I appreciate this comparative theological meditation on, you might call it non-dualism as well. I know Richard
Yeah.
Rohr writes very poignantly from the Catholic contemplative tradition about non-dual awareness. And I think that there's something profound you're pointing us toward, beyond this binary consciousness into a sense of ultimate mystery. And the ecological consequences of that are really, I think, profound for reawakening to the sanctity of the night. I think of an essay a professor of mine wrote called Our Vanishing Night. It was by Verlin Klinkenborg. It's a great read if anyone wants to read it. And he writes about the circadian rhythms of the human and how darkness is so important for our sleep, And for humans and for so many other creatures who navigate by the stars, as you're saying, who might get confused by artificial lighting and who depend on the deep sort of womb of darkness every night. And so I think for the sake of time, what we're going to do at this point in the program is I'd love to pivot to our question and answer and group discussion phase, Meredith.
Nice.
Yeah, we have a number of.
We covered a lot.
Oh, yeah, yeah, totally.
We've covered a lot. We gotta, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you and I could chat for the whole night time. But in lieu of that, we'd love to draw on the collective curiosity and insights from the group. I see Craig has a couple of comments in the chat. One about, given the number of threats to insects and wildlife, do you know of any prioritization of threats relative to their immediate and lasting impacts? Yeah, I'm trying to understand the answer to
Yeah.
that.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, you mean like which species are most impacted by light pollution, maybe?
Maybe, do you want to say something about that?
I mean, I can say there's been more and more literature on you probably talked about it during your last call. It's like, the bug apocalypse, the insect apocalypse, or, the mass die-off with insects that are happening right now. And so we know there was a paper that came out, gosh, it was just last year, that finally solved that riddle of why do insects spin around? Some insects spin around, like have that vacuum hose effect over near lights. And they found it's because of dorsal orientation, dorsal meaning back. The insects are trying to orient their back towards the light. And in the process, they're getting really confused. And in the process, they're not feeding, they're not reproducing, they're not doing their normal functions. So the impact of light pollution on insects is very severe. It's very severe. Migratory birds is more like in certain areas, as they navigate through, but the impact, because secondarily, those birds are insectivores. So for them not to have a lot of their foods and things, it's like it ends up being kind of like a cascade of different negative effects.
Mm-hmm.
Sheila, I'll try to find that study. It came out in, I think, February. It was like January or February of 2024. So if you Google it, I would have to Google it. I don't know it offhand. But it was a major research discovery about why insects spin around a light.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Meredith.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sheila also had a really evocative question in the chat that I think is relevant to a lot of us, but how do you work on your own ecological grief? Like, as somebody who is surrounded by a lot of like suffering and loss, how do you deal with that? How do you keep going?
It's a really tough, especially because I love these birds inordinately. Like I love these birds in particular that are affected by light pollution and also building collisions when they crash into glass as a result of being glass is confusing for birds and kills over 1 billion birds every year in our country alone. So it makes me unbelievably sad. And I can just say, I think it was like back in March of this year when I got some kind of a cold and I wasn't feeling well and I was feeling like couldn't sleep very well. And somehow I got into some really, really deep grief. A lot of my grief started to come out with this really bad cold where I was just lost it crying because I kept saying, God gave us a paradise. God gave us a paradise with everything we could ever wish for, with the beauty, with the changes. I mean, as much as it's a tragedy, with the natural world is a paradise. And look what we're doing. We're destroying this paradise that God gave us. And I almost couldn't breathe because I was crying so hard. And I had to let out all of this grief because honestly, at the beginning of fall migration, the beginning of spring migration, my prayers are always, and actually we did this practice when I was at YDS my last year, which was a practice of blessing our campus, of blessing the whole Yale University campus to try to make it a safer place for birds. Like we went around, we had a number of different events that were happening that day, which was like the first day of spring migration of 2023. And so I invited a lot of my classmates to lead ecological practices, spiritual ecological practices, and they all did different interesting things. And it was really to bless the space, to welcome the birds, to try to make it safer. And we did everything from a hike, Jack Berger, he did a hike to the top of East Rock, and other people were reading poems. Someone else had a creaturely communion. Kaylee did a creaturely communion. I mean, it was so beautiful. And really, the idea is, where are we going to put this grief? We have to bless this space. We have to realize that they're coming. We have to share it with the others who don't know or don't maybe realize the importance of it. These birds are coming. There's millions of them, and they need a safe sanctuary. They need a haven. And so that was really a way for me to deal with it, was a way to say, there's a lot coming, and let's gather, and let's use a spirituality and prayer as a way to work our way through this. But it can be overwhelming to me, to the point where, like, even right now, I kind of want to cry. I get very sad because these birds are beautiful. They're in the prime of their youth, and I can't handle or think about a world where we don't have a wood thrush, or where we don't have, the black-throated blue warbler, or other birds that are in peril right now. The thought of a world without these beautiful creatures, like, I just can't handle it. And so that's what almost motivates my work. I sometimes feel overwhelmed, but I feel my commitment to them is, I love them so much, I have to keep going for them.
Mm.
Yeah, I feel like I advocate on their behalf.
It's truly inspiring, Meredith. And your words remind me of a line from Thomas Berry, where he writes that every living being is a unique revelation of the divine, a unique voice. And so an extinction is a voice gone forever. You could say a kind of divine communication. And with that depth of feeling, I think it gives us an even greater sense of what are the stakes of habitat protection, of conservation, of light pollution mitigation, right? This is really spiritual work at its core. And so, Meredith, on another strand of sort of hopeful engagement, I know you've been involved with this community art building project that is taking a tour throughout the Northeast,
Oh,
and you've been
yeah.
partnering with this amazing artist. We'd be remiss not to hear a little bit about that other experience of community gathering and advocacy you're doing.
Yeah, sure. So that's another one with a lot of mixed emotions around it. I mean, that's purposely has a lot of complexity built into it. So I invite you all to check it out. It's Bird Collisions in the Anthropocene is what it's called. And it's a community art and it's conservation art practice, where people across the United States and Canada are invited, or actually, the project is to crowdsource the creation of 10,836 bird replicas of real birds that died on the streets of Chicago and were found in 2023. So in the city of Chicago, they have dedicated building monitors called the Chicago Bird Collision Monitors, and they go around every morning looking for birds that have crashed into the glass, and then they try to save them if they can, which they save about, I think it's like a quarter of them about, and then the other birds they ban them, or sorry, they tag them and give them to the Field Museum. So then the Field Museum in Chicago has this collection of literally many thousands of birds that have been found, and in one year, in 2023, almost 11,000 birds were created. So, sorry, were found. So the project does is it has these community gatherings where people make a life-size soft sculpture replica of a real bird that found. So, like, let's say 1,500 ovenbirds were found. Well, this project is making 1,500 ovenbirds. They're all the same species that were found, and it's like a way to, like, one, learn about the problem of collisions, two, to honor the birds that have been affected, and also to commemorate the birds. And there's so much potential in it, because Holly Greenberg, who started the project, She was a art professor at Syracuse, where I happened to move there, and she came up with this idea in 2023 after 1,300 birds crashed into one building in Chicago. Just one building, a glassy building in Chicago, all crashed. And so this was her way of trying to do something about this problem. She has now quit her job. She quit her job at Syracuse University and is now doing this full time in Evanston. And so she hosts these workshops. Now I'm hosting these workshops as a fellow, and people can host a workshop. Like Craig Ripaz, he's going to be hosting a workshop at Bent of the River in Connecticut. Minnoquatuck Audubon Society is going to be hosting a workshop around Migratory Bird Day, which is coming up on October 11th. So all these different organizations they host their own workshops, and we're crowdsourcing these gorgeous birds. And I recommend you go to the website just to see the beautiful birds that people are creating. Each one is unique. Each one is their own creation. And there's a lot that could be said around that, because there's the community gathering aspect, but then also there's also this opportunity to honor the birds and to really learn about which birds are impacted. Because some people have never even heard of like a swamp sparrow or never heard of American red star. And so this is a chance for them to learn about the birds.
Hmm.
Yeah, that are in peril.
I appreciate it's such an inspiring workshop, Meredith. I know my friend Tyler has participated, who's here, and
Yeah.
I certainly hope to participate in one. And Kim Stoner is asking in the chat, how can we get information about when these workshops are happening in Connecticut, and how can we help amplify these programs?
Yeah, you can host your own. Even if you have 5 people and you want to do a workshop, you can go to the website and it says host a workshop, and Holly will send you. They have these little bird body bases, and you can host your own workshop. If it's like your reading club, your church, your school, your anything, you can do this practice, and it's very communal. Like it kind of feels like a sewing bee. Um, because so many different organizations are doing their own, I can't say exactly, but Bend to the River should be up on their website soon. And then Minnoquatuck, I don't remember exactly where Dennis said he's going to schedule it, but he's literally scheduling it right now. So those are 2 that I know about in Connecticut. Bend to the River and Minnoquatuck is going to be hosting them. So that's like, yeah. Those are 2 I know about in Connecticut, but they're happening all over the place, and I highly encourage you to you can watch the video and you can host one yourself, even if it's just 3 of your friends and you want to have dinner and then make a bird. You can do it and be part of this project. Oh, I didn't say all the birds are being collected, and then it will travel around as a huge 300-foot long, like the size of a football field, of carpet of beautiful birds. And so they will travel around, and she's going to try to use the carpet to prick the conscience, to really, get the conscience of different places that are mitigating. Like really, one of her big motivators was Northwestern University, which has a lot of collisions and won't mitigate, won't make their buildings safer for birds. So she wanted to bring real birds to show them, look at all this death. And she realized, how can I bring, bird carcasses? What I'll do is I'll make soft sculpture birds, and I'll bring the soft sculpture birds to represent, look at all the birds that are dying here in Chicago. So it's going to be used as that travel around the country to try to also have another life. It's a way to give these birds another life. They will, tell the story of collisions.
It's such a powerful experience of presence, right? And when we presence ourselves to these species, our hearts are moved and we feel this deep kinship. I think about children, and how enchanted they are with birds and little creatures of the earth. And so how do we rekindle that? And I think this project is such a visceral way of doing that. I think about the Merlin app. For those who have used it, it's an app that helps identify bird songs and can be a helpful way of just getting to know the names of these birds that you mentioned, Meredith. And I found as I've gotten to know the names of birds, there's a kind of relationship forms, and that could be a name in any language, right? Even Robin Wall Kimmerer suggests that you might make up a name if you don't know the name of a creature. Maybe you can create one that can offer a sense of connection, right? A sense of kinship because there's such a power in naming, I think, right? And giving a sense of personhood, right, to another being, right? This isn't just a statistic. These are lives. These are lives that may have
Yeah.
flown from Tierra del Fuego, right, down in Chile. These
Yeah.
creatures may have flown thousands of miles.
Yeah, there's a really beautiful line in the book Migration on the Wing, is that says that the birds are knitting together the geographies of the world. You have a bird that starts in, like in Argentina, goes up through Colombia, goes through Nicaragua, goes up through Texas, ends up in Connecticut. I mean, it's really amazing to think about the length, and when you see the migration patterns of the birds on a map, feel that connection, and then you see like how all these spaces are connected by this one bird that's truly is moving around through space and connecting, Connecticut to Tierra del Fuego. You know what I mean?
It's
And it's
incredible,
amazing.
isn't it?
This
Yeah.
one little teeny bird that's this big, and they literally weigh as much as 6 pennies. Like if you put 6 pennies in your hand, that's how much the average warbler weighs. Or that's actually a smaller one. But like they weigh less than 10 pennies, and they're flying these vast distances. They're knitting together our ecosystems. They're moving nutrients around. They're making a go of it, and they're leaving with real faith and hope that they'll get to where they're trying to go. And so it's like heartbreaking when you think that they're going to get disoriented or confused by some lights or some glass, that they haven't evolved to know what that is yet. So
Hmm.
it's just like sort of heartbreaking the way that our choices are severing those connections that you mentioned, Sam. Like we
Hmm.
want to be knitted together. That's our place in the world. We want to feel a connection to the world and to feel that we're not alone here. And so how do we do that is knowing we really are. We truly are. Your choice of turning off the light makes you might not feel it immediately, but if you do the contemplation on it, your choices are making you deeper connected to all the creatures around you that you're having appreciation for, and a respect for, and literally your life is connected to their life. Their
Yeah.
life is connected to you. So it's like actually, it's really powerful when you think about what our choices mean. I know we think about it a lot, but in particular with life coaching.
Mhm. It's, really well said, Meredith. And I think this point is really important about how birds transcend borders. They transcend bioregions. And so
Yeah.
they challenge these like geopolitical boundaries and the sort of othering that we see so often in collective politics as well about who's allowed in, who's kept out, right? These birds, they they fly where they've flown for thousands of years, right? And I think it's a powerful reminder of that deep interconnectedness and the sense of belonging to one another, right? This being knit
Mhm.
together, as you said. I know Sheila has her hand up and has asked some awesome questions in the chat.
Um, Thanks for the opportunity. Is anybody taking the story of these, the wellness and the salutogenic behaviors of these migrating birds and supporting actual human migrants that are also dealing with the same problem? Is anybody putting those two things together? Is there any article?
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that because we had the most amazing classmate. I mean, I'm just going to talk on a very particular personal level, and then I can answer it a little bit more broadly. But we had really amazing classmate at Yale who was Haitian American, and when I would talk about migration and about the migration of the birds, of saying like, look, the birds are trying to migrate, but the way that our systems are being built, literally the way that we're structuring and the choices that we're making is making it like actually like deadly for them. um it really resonated with her, especially because she went down to the southern border, the US Mexican border, and was there and was doing translations for people, and she said that she felt like like some kind of a resonance there with what was happening, with people being not allowed in, and not accepting that, like, migration is actually a part of the natural order, like just creatures moving around, humans moving around. In terms of in a larger scale, I know some work has been done like with Audubon. I think it's become sort of a sensitive topic lately, like with especially with the ice raids and the new political climate with migration. But I think that Audubon was looking at that, and I can say for myself personally with this project, bird collisions in the Anthropocene, we're partnering with this group called Union, which is like it's a Spanish-speaking, mainly nonprofit organization based in Chicago that they are building a green space that they're calling their Plaza Verde. So like their green center, where they want to host these workshops and then use the making of these birds for the project, which are soft skills, to be able to talk about issues of loss, of mourning, of migration, and then that becomes like a way to almost like or like have a chaplain's experience of like talking people through the different emotions that can come up with that. But yeah, that's just one way. But we wrote a grant, and so we're hoping to be able to partner with them more because that's a community that don't always. This is also part of placemaking. Like when new new immigrants and new Americans don't necessarily are as familiar with the birds. But I can say the woman who's in charge of that program, America, like she told us that when in her community they saw a hummingbird that had migrated from Mexico, and they said, "Oh my God, that's a hummingbird like we have in my village." So they are going to name their Plaza Verde after this particular kind of hummingbird. It's to show that there's a connection between Mexico and Chicago. Is that the birds are both places, the people are both places, and then like the lifespans across them. I wish there could be more because like I think you're so right. There's a lot of resonance there.
Mm, mm. Thank you, Meredith. How about a comment that Martha brings up about bird collisions with cars? Can you say anything about that?
Yeah, that's another source when they talk about like human related bird mortality. It's definitely there on the list. Number one is now bird collisions. Number two is cats. People let their cats outside, and cats are introduced species, so the birds are not used to dealing with them. But and there's like power lines. There's all these different threats. But on there definitely is vehicular collisions, and those affect like kind of the larger birds. Those are more like hawks and ravens and things like that that like go on the road. But
I
I don't
see a
know.
lot of smaller birds, catbirds
Oh
fly
no.
low, a lot of sparrows. I'm in Western Massachusetts,
Mhm.
and people drive on country roads well over the speed limit. And I find lots, as I walk along the roads, I find lots of dead birds, small birds, not just the bigger hawks and crows and vultures. I've been shocked at how many.
Yeah, yeah, the numbers are really high. I know it's in the many, many millions. I personally don't work on that particular issue, but people have also mentioned to me, like the woman who is head of Bent of the River Audubon Center in Connecticut, Robin Ladouceur. She wonders about what the effects of all the headlights are, because we're talking about light pollution, and I know there's like vehicular accidents, but how does all the light pollution, because you can see along the headlines, how is that disturbing all the habitat that's near? And you can see a lot of sky glow over a lot of the highways. Like I-95 is lit up on a light pollution map. So it's something, if you look at a light pollution map, it's the major arteries of our vehicle, tr our those are our major uh, transportation arteries, but they're also lit up the most is I-95, I-91, and so we have to really consider like how our driving choices are affecting birds as well. But particularly, it's not something I work on. I work specifically on buildings.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, as we come to a close tonight, and in the spirit of honoring the night that awaits us, at least for those in the Northern Hemisphere who are relatively close. I know we have some friends on the West Coast. Yeah, I would wonder, Meredith, if you might offer any parting words for us and perhaps a closing prayer to help grace us as we move forward with all the wisdom that you have shared.
Well, I just want to thank everyone for being here. I'm sure we could talk about this a lot. It's a huge topic. I mean, it's half of our lived experiences in the night and so many spiritual resonance and cultural resonance. And so I just appreciate this opportunity. It's so meaningful. So I'm going to close with a prayer that's going to be a universal, a interfaith prayer. Oh, great mystery. Oh, infinite expanse of the darkness, show us how to love the night. Give us the strength and the insight to resist this perpetual day that we're creating right now. To know that the darkness has value and that the darkness is doing great and important work. Help us to find time for rest and restoration. Help us to remember that all plants, beasts, and people belong to a web that is silent but strong, and every choice that we make leaves a trail in its wake, and to remember that we are part of something much bigger. So as we go forward the rest of the week and in the days to come and in these long summer nights, let us remember and cherish the night environment.
Amen. Meredith, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I know so many of us have shared our inspiration from your life's work and your deep spiritual compass. I even received some private chats about folks who had to leave early, but who were just so deeply moved by what you shared. And I think these stories are what help animate us, help us feel less alone in this work, to remember that folks like you are out there protecting the integrity of creation, even in the dark recesses of the night. And
I
so
can only say, come join me. Join me in that. So that's my invitation. That's my very special invitation.
Awesome.
Always need some friends and allies in this work.
Awesome. Well, maybe you can leave your email in the chat and then we can send it out to participants. But please join me in a special round of gratitude and applause for our wonderful presenter tonight, Meredith Barges. Yeah, thanks for all the amazing work you're doing, Meredith. And please stay connected with the forum and look forward to supporting your work however we can in the time to come.
Thanks so much. Have a good night, everyone. If it's a clear night, go look at the stars. Let us know what you see. Report back. Good night.
Sounds great. Good night, everyone.
Good night.